Hello, it's time for French politics here on France 24. I'm Mark Perlman.
And I'm Molly Hall. Coming up in this edition of the Political Brief, the National Assembly adopts a new anti-terrorism bill, the law designed to end France's two-year state of emergency.
And the deadly terror attack in Marseille last weekend prompts the right to lash out at the government for its response to terrorism and especially to illegal immigration.
Plus, man of the people or president of the rich. Emmanuel Macron's plan to slash taxes for the happy few is not going down well.
This week, France's National Assembly is adopting a new anti-terrorism bill. The goal is to allow France to exit the state of emergency that has been in place for nearly 2 years.
President Macron has a clear majority in Parliament, but his bill is triggering criticism from both the political left and right.
L'état d'urgence sera décrété.
November 13th, 2015. After the Paris attacks, a grave-faced François Hollande announced that France was officially under a state of emergency. Nearly 2 years later, those measures have been renewed 6 times. Now, Emmanuel Macron wants to end the state of emergency, but enshrine many of its principles into law.
The bill will allow us to end the state of emergency on November the 1st because it does not protect us from the terrorist threat. Otherwise, numerous attacks in the past months and years against our country, despite the state of emergency, wouldn't have occurred.
Under the bill, authorities will have the power to conduct home searches and house arrests without a warrant, limit public gatherings that pose a security threat, temporarily ban places of worship promoting extremism, and enact tighter controls on air, land, and sea borders. Many powers that require the approval of a judge will fall under the purview of a local prefect. For critics on the left, this will be a serious infringement on personal liberties.
The problem is giving executive powers to the interior minister or prefect, meaning they can deprive individuals of freedom or intrude in their personal lives, all on a suspicion. The government wants people to believe that this is the more efficient way of combating terrorism. We say it's not efficient, but dangerous.
On the other side of the political spectrum, critics like far-right leader Marine Le Pen and members of the conservative Les Républicains party are also calling on the government to abandon the bill, but because it doesn't go far enough in fighting terrorism.
We are against this bill because we believe that ending the state of emergency when the terror threat is at an all-time high is a mistake. We believe that people who are considered dangerous to national security no longer have a place in our country.
Unlike the UK and Belgium, which have both also been affected by domestic terrorism, France is the only country in Western Europe to have implemented and maintained a state of emergency for such an extended period of time.
Well, Molly, of course, terrorism is a deeply emotional and controversial issue. Earlier this week, an undocumented man with a criminal record, but apparently no ties to terrorism, stabbed to death 2 women in the southern city of Marseille. He had been detained before and used 7 fake identities in previous encounters with the police.
That's right, Mark. Now that's got politicians on the right criticizing the government and its handling of situations like this. We've got Nadine Morano, a member of the Conservative Party, making a point through Twitter saying he was an illegal immigrant. He was known to police and not deported from French soil. Result, 2 women died. Then we've got Nicolas Dupont-Aignan, the former presidential candidate turned Marine Le Pen ally, had this to say, saying that if the government deported foreigners who break the law, this Islamic State terrorist would not have been in France.
Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on the government, not really to track down only people with links to terrorism, but actually illegal immigrants. And for instance, we have two Conservative MPs who've actually put forth a bill proposal in Parliament that would make it automatic to expel foreigners with criminal records.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, Mark, now separately, we did see the government unveil its first budget. This is always a delicate balancing act, all the more so for a president who wants to be neither from the right nor the left.
It's a balancing act of cutting spending and lowering taxes, but the French government has also had to scale back its ambitions, taking its target tax cuts from 10 to 7 billion euros. Budget cuts will also fall by less than previously planned, 15 billion euros instead of 20 billion euros. The cuts, which will mostly affect health, social housing subsidies and social security, were widely criticized by the left.
16 billion in cuts represents a whole lot of money taken from public services. This budget is a gift to the rich. We estimate about 8 billion in cuts favoring the top 1%, while the lower 10% suffer.
The government's top priority, to lower the country's public deficit from 2.9% in 2017 to 2.6% of GDP in 2018. This will bring it under the 3% limit required by the European Union. By making trimming its deficit a priority, President Macron aims to restore France's fiscal credibility in Europe and show its European partners, especially Germany, that France can lead by example.
It was necessary, essential even, that we found our way back to a dialogue with Europe. And our exemplary economic policies will give strength to the President's voice in this ambitious project to reform the EU.
During his presidential campaign, Macron, a former banker, promised to get public finances in order after a decade of running large deficits due to high public spending.
Now, President Macron wants to kickstart the French economy with a more business-friendly agenda, but his left-wing critics, and even some on the right, say that the 2018 budget is a gift to the rich. Now, telling us more is Florence Vilmino. And Flo, one question right now is it true that France's rich and powerful gain the most under this new budget?
Well, that's certainly what the press on the left thinks. Let's take a look at the front page of Libération from a few days ago. You can see on their take on things that Macron, he is the hero of the rich. And the truth of the matter is that rich people do stand to gain a lot from this new budget. For instance, profits on financial investments will be taxed a flat rate of 30% rather than under a progressive regime. If we take a look at some other examples, you'll see that the corporation tax is set to go down to 25% by 2022, down from 33% currently, but especially that the place where rich people will really gain is that the French government has announced changes to France's controversial fortune tax known as the ISF.
Yes, this wealth tax was actually put in place by the first socialist president, François Mitterrand, in the early 1980s, and it's going to go through a major transformation.
A total facelift, you might say, in fact, because up until now, the fortune tax was levied on all wealth, so financial and property wealth, and now it will only be levied on property worth more than 1.3 million euros, so essentially real estate. That means that France's 342,000 wealthiest households are going to be a lot better off now that this ISF wealth fortune tax will change. The change is so radical that the name is actually going to change. Let's take a look. It's going to go from being the ISF to the IFI. Essentially, the solidarity tax on fortune is going to become the tax on real estate fortune.
And so then, Flo, that means that many things that used to be taxed in the name of solidarity, well, that just won't be the case anymore.
Many things, for instance, dividends, but also more, I guess, bling-bling things like yachts, private jets, also racehorses, jewels, bars of gold. You can see some images of some of these pretty swish things that are no longer going to be taxed. And this is a very important sticking point for the left, because they've always seen the solidarity tax as a tool for social justice, essentially to reduce the gap between the very rich and the very poor. Now, the number of people paying this tax, so no longer the ISF, but the IFI, the number of people paying that tax is going to drop by 40%. That means that that's a loss of 3.2 billion euros for the state. And as you can imagine, this has created a yacht-sized problem for the government. Even members of the president's La République En Marche party have criticized the fact that these things aren't going to be taxed anymore and have actually called on them to be taxed somewhat else in a symbolic way.
Thanks a lot, Florence. And to rebound on what you actually just said, Emmanuel Macron is clearly eager to show that he cares for the working class. So he went back to his hometown of Amiens in northern France for a highly symbolic visit. Back in April, between the two rounds of the presidential election, he paid a tense visit to a Whirlpool factory that was about to close.
That's right, Mark. Well, he faced off with unhappy workers, stood his ground, and promised to come back with good news after his election. Well, on Tuesday, he did so with cameras on, of course.
I promised in April during the presidential campaign that I would return to Whirlpool. I stated the truth then when I said that Whirlpool should not be nationalized. It is not a company the state can save. I believe I spoke the truth at the time. I didn't make commitments that could lead to people being disappointed or even be seen as lying to them.
And finally, we're going to end the show with a love declaration by a minister to his president. The government spokesman and the minister in charge of relations with the parliament, Christophe Castaner, went out of his way to explain why he decided to join hands with Macron.
That's right, indeed. He said, I'm totally at ease with this loved-up aspect. I'm extremely hard on myself, so if I must have a boss, then I need to feel admiration for that person. And Emmanuel is fascinating. Everything about him is fascinating. His sharpness, his career, and even his physical strength.
On those loving words, that's all we have time for this week.
Indeed. We'll see you again next time right here on The Political Brief.
The Debate, hosted by François Picard.
Live from Paris, a debate on the big story of the day with experts, newsmakers and observers. Continue the debate after the show is over by sharing your views on our forums.
The Debate on France 24 and France24.com.